So like Carper said, my name is Porf Gallegos. I work at the Burlington Police Department. I actually worked with Carper, for some time on night shift. I've been there for about 5 years, so I've had a lot of different opportunities and a lot of different positions I've been able to hold while I've been there. With that being said, I'm originally not from the Burlington area. I'm from the Chicagoland suburbs. My wife used to work at the University of Iowa. When I started to go into law enforcement, I tested with the Burlington Police Department. They offered, and we moved down here, and that was 5 years ago. I have a son. He's a year and 5 months. His name's Elliot. He's the best. I also have 2 cats, both from the shelter here in town. I have a pet dog, Sam. She's also from the shelter. And my partner, Canine Chase, I just picked him up about 3 weeks ago, and he's been living at my house ever since. Jumping into it. Why I got into law enforcement? So I was actually interested in law enforcement from a super young age. It was just kind of one of those things that always kind of sparked my interest. English isn't my first language, Spanish is, so I used to watch a lot of TV growing up, and because my parents didn't know English well, they didn't really know what I watched, so I would always watch Law & Order SVU, and it just became something I was like, wow, this is really cool. Like, these guys are out solving crimes, putting bad guys away, and ever since then I was just kind of hooked, and it was something I knew I wanted to do. My son is actually named after one of the main characters of the show, Detective Elliot State. So that's why I got into law enforcement. I knew it was a great option, and I knew, more importantly, because of my Spanish-speaking ability, I can reach a demographic and a community of people who otherwise would have no option to effectively communicate with law enforcement. So that's why I got into law enforcement. I enjoy it. I don't know what else I would do if I wasn't doing it. My hiring process was a little different. So I went to Western Illinois University for undergraduate. My bachelor's is in law enforcement and justice administration. My minor is in fire science, because for a brief moment I wanted to be a firefighter. After college, I had the opportunity to go to graduate school at Eastern Illinois University. And while I was there, I wanted to get a master's in something that could benefit my law enforcement career. So I actually have a master's in counseling, which vastly helps my interview skills, and it also helps me in some other aspects of the job that we'll talk about later. While I was at grad school, I met my wife. She's a year older than me, so she got a job at the University of Iowa, and after I graduated grad school, I moved in with her, and I was like, well, it's time to start testing places. The first place I tested was the Bolingbrook Police Department in Illinois. And their process, I was actually in the high school, and I applied with 300 other people. So all of us were in the auditorium. We all took a 2-hour test. And then after that, they told us to come back in different hour sections for our physical stuff. Our physical stuff consisted of a 1.5-mile run. For Illinois, you have to do a bench press, you have to do push-ups, and you have to do a certain number of sit-ups. So that was my first kind of run at it. After that, there is a interview process, which took place a week later. They were different in the aspect of, I actually didn't interview with the police department, I interviewed with their city council. So that was a unique opportunity. After that, I returned back to Iowa and got to take part in what's called at the time it was the regional law enforcement testing. So I got to take one test, but I got to apply with several different police departments. So that was really nice. And that's how I ended up, working at the Burlington Police Department. So what that looked like, I showed up very similarly again. There was about 25 to 30 people at this one. So it was notably like, oh, this is a lot less people. There, we actually did our physical first. So we did our 1.5-mile run, we did our push-ups, we did our sit-ups, we did our sit and reach at the time. And then if you passed that, you got to take the written test. The unique thing about that is I actually got to see, okay, there was 20 of us, 25, 30 of us at the start, and when we went to take the written test, there was actually only about 15 of us. So that already cut the numbers in half. So I was like, okay, I gotta pass this, I need a job now. So I actually passed my written test and applied with the Fort Madison Police Department, the Keokuk Police Department, and the Burlington Police Department. I interviewed with the Keokuk Police Department on a Wednesday. I actually interviewed with their command staff. And then that Friday, I interviewed at the Burlington Police Department. Saturday, I got a phone call, and they were like, hey, we want to offer you the position. let's do it. A lot of people talk about the hiring process, but after you get what's called a conditional offer, there's still a further application process. So what that means is they start a background check on you. So you actually meet with a detective. The detective I met with was Detective Schwant, and he pretty much dives into everything you've ever done since you were 16. So you give references, you give people who, he asked me, hey, who's the number one person you hate? And I told him, and he was like, okay, I'm gonna talk to him, what's he gonna say? And I pretty much told him, hey, here's, what he's gonna say, here's his perspective of me, and here's why we don't get along. So they talk about your past criminal history. The most important thing in the hiring process that I tell people is to just be honest. You know what I mean? Everyone lives a life. Just because you make a couple mistakes doesn't mean you can't be an officer. If anything, it means you can be a better officer, you can better relate to people. Part of the background test is taking a polygraph. Does everybody know what a polygraph is?
We were talking about that yesterday.
Yep. So after you talk to your detective and you pretty much tell them, hey, here's what I've done, here's X, Y, and Z. They sit you down, they put you in a little chair. They put a little butt pad on the chair, they put a little thing on your feet, and they strap you up to a bunch of machines. And a person just essentially does another conducted interview with you, just to make sure you're not being deceitful, you're not trying to hide anything. After that, they'll do a background check, so they'll actually go around your neighborhood and talk to your neighbors and be like, hey, what do you think of this person? Have you ever had any negative interactions? They talk to your wife, ex-girlfriends, ex-boyfriends, and things like that, just to kind of check out your character of a person. After that all checks out and you're good to go, you still have to take another test. It's called an MMPI, and it's a psychological test. And that test is pretty much made to see where you are psychologically and make sure you can hold and do the job effectively, and that it wouldn't affect you in a significant capacity. And then after all that is done, you still have a meeting with the chief, and you essentially get the blessing, and then you kind of start the whole thing. So that was my hiring process with the Burlington Police Department. From start to finish, probably took about 2 months within that. And the whole time, you obviously have to make yourself available and answer any questions if they do come up.
You missed the fun yesterday. We'll talk about law enforcement academy.
Oh.
Yeah. I had volunteers who went through the firing range with their handguns. And so they're literally doing everything we did as they're running. Going to the ball down here doing it.
Nice. So just a real quick glance on the academy. So after you get your real offer, at Burlington Police Department, you do a 2-week orientation type deal. So you ride around with state patrol, you go to dispatch, you go to the fire department, you go to night shift, day shift, the detectives, evidence, things like that, the records clerks, just to see what it contains with everything. Then you go to the academy. It's 16 weeks. My academy was residential, so I lived there. You pretty much cover all the basics of like criminal law, real basic traffic stops, real basic, defense scenarios, real basic shooting and things like that. I was there Monday to Friday, so I got to go home every weekend, and it was a fun time. I had the opportunity to go with another person who's hired with Burlington Police Department, some of your roommates, so we got pretty close and shared that aspect. And then after that, you start what's called FTO, the field training, your field training officer, field training. And you go through that for 4 different sessions. And after that, they kind of cut you loose, put you in the car and tell you, hey, you're good to go. So, jumping into some of the different jobs I've held. So I've been there 5 years. I've worked on night shift patrol. I've worked on day shift patrol. Within those, I still had different responsibilities. One of the first of which was being a crisis intervention team member. So I went to crisis intervention team training. And that is a training that's allotted to officers to assist people who are in crisis, right? Crisis could be anything from a mental episode to a very emotional episode to even a financially, like, I need housing episode. That was a great training. I am a trainer for that now. Huh?
Yeah, an incredible instructor.
Yep, Carver was one of my instructors. I'm actually an instructor for that. And it's a great way to allow officers to put themselves in the shoes of somebody experiencing crisis, but more importantly, effectively communicate with a person going through crisis, right? Because everyone's going to respond differently, and especially when you're worked up and you're going through an emotional moment, you're going to want to be talked to a different type of way. I also eventually became a field training officer, so a training officer for probationary officers. I did that for a couple of years. trying to make sure I don't miss anything. I was on bike patrol, so I got to wear shorts at work and I got to ride a bike around at night, so that was really fun. Bike patrol officers can do everything regular officers can do, and they can do it a lot more sneakily, so that was really cool.
What's the training that you go through to do that?
So you have to, there's a separate training course, and it's about a week long. We have the opportunity to have a trainer in-house, Officer Merriman, Officer Carper's wife's brother. You go through different training scenarios. There's actually a firing range portion. You have to ride upstairs, you have to ride downstairs. You have to effectively talk on the radio on your bike. We do several miles on the bikes. The biggest day was about a 25-mile ride, up hills, down hills, all over town. And you have to be doing all of that while talking on the radio, right, while being able to upshift, downshift, turn your sirens off, turn your lights on, turn everything on. So, and you
Yes,
can
the lights are equipped with lights and sirens.
Yep. You can do traffic stops on the bike. You can do everything on the bike. I'm on boat patrol, so it's essentially it works in conjunction with the fire department. You know, if we need to go out there to conduct a rescue, we can do that. If we need to go out there to do enforcement things on the water, we can do that as well. If we're setting up for a possible jumper on the bridge, we can launch the boat and be down there and assist as soon as they're ready. If a boat is sinking, which we've had, we can put the boat out there and help the people who are out there, like boat patrol. I'll make sure I don't miss anything.
CID.
Yep, I'm getting there. I've also done, so I'm the instructor for the SAVE program, so the school bus stop arm violators. Who rides the school bus to a school? Has anybody blown by the school bus with a stop arm being out? So when that happens, that driver actually loses their license for 6 months, unless they come take my class, where I tell them, hey, here's why the law's in place, here's what you can do, here's why you shouldn't do it. So I've been teaching that for about 4 years. After all that, I've been about on patrol for 2.5 years at that point. I had the opportunity to go to the Criminal Investigations Division, so I was a detective. I worked general crime, so anything that was significantly heinous, any large amounts of property crime, any large amounts of fraud crime, any sexual assault-based crime, I worked. I had several good cases. Did that for about 1 year and 8 months. I enjoyed it. It was a great job. It is what I tell people, comparing the investigations division to patrol, it was the same job in a completely different aspect. On patrol, I had obviously the opportunity to.
It's okay. Go ahead.
You're good. It's the same job in a different aspect. On patrol, oftentimes you feel as though it's go, go, go. But when it comes to investigations, time's on your side, right? So honestly, what I tell people is, my entire focus when I went into work one day, I would sit in the parking lot and I go, this is the only report I have to get that day. And I would pour every ounce of my day into that report. Into what people said, how they said it, why they said it, how they were sitting when they said it, what they were doing with their hands when they said it, what they were doing with their eyes when they said it, were they sweating, were they not sweating, were they stuttering, were they talking too fast, were they talking too slow, were they looking at me, were they not looking at me, does their story check out, did I take their cell phone, did I dump it, did I look through the contents, did I do a search warrant on their Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, TikTok, messages, their data, where their cell phone pinged. So all that has to go into a report. So you really want to take your time and include all that, because all that includes, as Detective Riffle probably talked about, super important things. So what I always tell people is the biggest thing that helps us now is cell phones. Because while you think, oh, it's a Snapchat, it goes away, it doesn't. So it's actually like super embedded in there. And I can tell where you're standing from a meter just by doing a search warrant on your cell phone. So if I did a search warrant on my cell phone right now, it's going to say it's a meter from that desk. And that's from where I'm standing in a circle. So I did that for a little bit. I enjoyed it. The schedule changed because when I was on patrol, I was on night shift, so I worked 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. But as a detective, I work 8 to 4 Monday to Friday. So I had every weekend off unless something crazy happened when I came in. So something crazy includes arsons, any crime against a victim that was deemed especially heinous, any property crime that was immediate, or honestly just coming out and helping patrol if they needed anything. After that, I got to do something I've been wanting to do since I got hired, and since I was a kid. I was selected to be the next canine handler, and that's the position I'm in now. So being a canine handler, I am essentially, what I tell people is I'm the interpreter and the trained specialist in my own tool, that tool being my partner, Canine Chase. Canine Chase is 3 years old. He's a German Shepherd. He's got a black body with brown paws. Little bit about his story. He's from the Netherlands, and he is a world champion Schützenhound dog. Schützenhound is a German sports dog competition that they do in Europe. He is very emotional, and what I mean by that is he's very people aggressive. So part of Schützenhound is patrol aspects, and that includes apprehension, which just means bite work. So if somebody is attempting to evade us, and they've committed especially violent crime, they're deemed a danger to the public or officers, or they're actively trying to elude, I can release Canine Chase and he'll essentially bite and hold them until I get to him and pull him off. He's a big dog, he's 95 pounds, you'll see him when I bring him in here. He does obedience, he does tracking so he can smell narcotics, he's trained to smell opioids, heroin, cocaine, methamphetamine, crystal meth, MDMA, and we're working on marijuana. So he does all that. He also does tracking, which is a really cool aspect of him. So I put a little vest on him, give him a command. I can give him a piece of, right now he's actually tracking my son. So I give him a little piece of my son's clothing that I put his ball about 1.5 miles away from us. And from the steps I took to get to that 1.5 miles, he can get to the ball, no issues. So we can track people who are runaways, we can track people who are missing, we can track people who are effectively evading law enforcement, and that's one of his strong suits. Canine Chase does live with me, but he doesn't live in my house. He has his own house in my backyard. When we come home, you'll see when I bring him in here, Canine Chase has 2 collars he always wears. It's either his prong collar or his choke collar, which he wears when he's walking or when we're not doing police work, and then he has a flat collar. His flat collar is a 2-inch brown collar that circles his. It's got a handle on it. He can tell when the prong collar is on or when the flat collar is on. When the flat collar is on, that means we're doing police work. It's time to focus up. It's time to notice, and you'll see he shifts into a different attitude. When the prong collar is on, it's hey, we're out for a walk, or hey, use the bathroom, or hey, we're doing something. A lot of our communication just comes from leash work, and you'll see that. Being a canine has been probably one of the most fun jobs I've had. It's super enjoyable. I love dogs. I love training with them. We train every day. There isn't a day I don't do anything with Canine Chase, just because he is a tool and he has to be maintained every day. Otherwise, he loses certain skills, right? So we have to maintain that connection him and I have so that I can effectively use him correctly when it comes to having to use him to track somebody or having to use him for any police work. How has this affected my life or my family life? It's affected it a lot. This job, as I'm sure Carper has told you, really a lot of my day is, especially now, centered around Canine Chase because he gets fed at the same time every day. He needs training every day, and he lives with me, right? So that means I'm always on 24/7. With Canine Chase and him being a little bit more aggressive, it's important that I always know where he's at. I have a camera in his kennel. I have a camera in the car. And more importantly, I don't want my wife or kid to, be exposed to him if I'm not present. Aside from that, obviously working night shift affected my family life a lot. I was home at night. Luckily, I live in town, so my wife always knew I was a real quick ride away. When I had my son Elliot, I was a detective, so obviously big call-outs, you miss some things, you miss birthday parties, you miss special events, you miss large gatherings, different things like that. But it's all kind of accepted, and when I started testing places and when I interviewed places, I understand the responsibilities that came with the position, but more importantly, I understood that this is something that is going to affect a lot of my family life. People will tell you that it's expected to miss a lot of those things, but at the end of the day, I always tell people, while I may be an officer, I'm a family man first, and I'll always put my family in front of it. So that's kind of my big thing. Personally, I always tell people that one of the big things when you get into law enforcement you want to establish is a person you can talk to, and I'm fortunate enough the person I can talk to is my wife. So if I myself am never stressed about something or something's on my mind, I talk to my wife about it and we walk through that process, and she's been a heaven sent for that. With that being said, those are all the questions on your sheet. Are there any other questions anybody has about anything? Detective related, dog related, anything like that? Nothing. No questions about the canine?
detective.
I was. I'm a canine handler now. Mm-hmm. So.
You're gonna get to see the dog too, you got right in.
Mm-hmm.
I think I've seen it.
Uh-oh. Good, bad, and different? Fair. Anything else?
So when you went through the FTO process,
Mhm.
you tell them how you handled that.
Sure. That's a great question. So our process is broken up into 4 different sections. You have what's called a primary FTO, which is essentially the officer who's in charge of you, right? Typically it's an older officer who's got a lot of experience, who takes you under their wing. They take you from not knowing anything to watching you know everything. So the first month and a half, they're essentially telling you, hey, here's how you drive the squad car, here's how you talk on the radio, here's what you're supposed to say, here's what you shouldn't say, here's how you take a report, here's what you ask people when you're out talking to them, here's the important information you need to ask, here's how you ask it in a nice way. So for me, it was really just about being a sponge and taking everything everyone was telling me. You'll go through 3 different FTOs, your primary, which is the first one. You go to a secondary for about a month. The secondary and your primary can be completely different officers, and they can handle things in a completely different aspect. So it's nice to get to that experience of like, oh, this person does it this way, or this person does it the other way. Your third FTO will also be a different person, and they can handle it completely different than the other 2. As you're progressing within the different stages, you're expected to do about 25% of the work. The first step, you do 50% of the work. The second step, you're expected to do 75% on the third step. And then by that last step, you really should be doing everything on your own, and the other officer's just there to supervise you and make sure everything's okay. So the way I processed it was very similar to, I wrestled all throughout middle school and high school. I just came in with a goal every day and made sure if I did anything, it was at least that goal. So maybe it was just remembering the streets between division and angular, or angular and south, both south and north, and just tackling it that way, piece by piece. So, anything else?
What's been your biggest challenge?
My biggest challenge. So, my biggest challenge has been my biggest challenge. I would say it's been my ability to slow down. I am a very, I think fast, I talk fast, I process things pretty fast. And Carver and I were actually just talking about this beforehand. It's been recognizing that very rarely will I ever have to make a decision like that. And the things you miss when you make a decision quickly are very important. So it's been, for me, slowing down, looking at the big picture, and looking at those things I talked about, especially like within an interview. Everything from how they're sitting, to the way their feet are positioned, to the way they're breathing, to the way they're looking at you, to the way they're answering their questions, to the way their voice sounds, are important. Because people will tell you things even if they're telling you a complete lie, in different aspects of it. So for me, it's been slowing down, looking at the big picture, and making sure you take your time on everything. Because we have really a super important job, right? And we want to make sure that our victims are taken care of. And more importantly, we want to make sure that just because someone's going to jail, it doesn't mean they don't get the same services offered that are, we would give to the general public. So slowing down has been my thing. But now I have to slow chase down, so that's a big thing too.
So I've noticed you talking a lot about watching people's breathing and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
Why does that kill you?
It tells me a lot of things. The way we act, a lot of our communication, though people often think it's the way we talk, it's actually not. A lot of our communication is nonverbal, and I learned that specifically through going through my master's in counseling. Right, a lot of the ways people will tell you things come from the way they're sitting. So the way I'm sitting here, I've been picking at my hand this whole time because that's a tick for me, and I'm nervous. I'm nervous talking to large crowds of people. People who notice that could say, okay, he's trying to calm himself down by picking at the back of his hand. But I'm also sitting in a way that distributes my weight accordingly to make me more comfortable, right? You've been leaning on your hand this entire time we've been talking because you're trying to remain attentive, but you're also wanting to make sure that you can see him in your peripheral this whole time. Because when he takes a note, you take a note, and then he confirms his note by the note you took. So it's important to be observational because those are big things, right? People will tell us things they don't want to tell us by the way they sit, the way they breathe. On a roadside interview, the way I can use canine chase for narcotics is based off of what's called reasonable articulable suspicion. And what that means is I have to be able to say, well, the gut feeling I had that something was happening in the car came from this. And this is exactly how it goes. I walk up to the car and I do what's called a passenger approach. So I go to the passenger side and the person is staring intently at the rearview mirror waiting for me to come, and they've got all 3 documents in their hand. They've also lit a cigarette. Immediately, their hands are shaking. I can see their carotid artery right here pulsating, meaning that they're nervous, but they're nervous to the point of like they can't control the way their body portrays it. Maybe they're sweating and it's like 10 degrees outside, so they're trying to conceal something. So it's super important to recognize this, right? Slow down and do what you need to do at that time. So I noticed those things. I think that's what allowed me to ascend to that detective position relatively quickly, which is big. So I would definitely recommend taking like a communications class or taking a counseling class if you can. So, great question.
Good answer.
Mm-hmm. Anything else? You good if I grab Chase?
Go get Chase.
Cool. So I will ask, if you're in the front row, do me a favor, go to the second row, grab your chair, put it in the aisle. No flash photography, no loud noises. Don't scream. Don't make any quick movements. Don't try to distract him. He's going to be on a long leash. I'm going to be holding it the whole time. If I trust him, I'll do a little cool still thing where I leave him back there and have him come to me. But yeah, cool. Be right back. Is that door going to be locked?
It's over.
Okay, cool.
Are we like creating a barrier so you don't bite us?
Little barrier.
Is he gonna bite us?
This is the first time I've got to see this dog. Just got him 3 weeks ago. So I'm pretty excited too to see this dog. The dog you're gonna see tomorrow is gonna be a little underneath.
We're gonna see another dog?
Yeah, tomorrow. We have, what's that? I guess that
He said no flash photography.
yeah. That's pretty sweet.
I do everything he said.
I did myself, I hated it. In fact, they asked me if I teach them. I can't do that. Because I have my wife who watches reads the checkbook that I try to write something in. I'll write something in, you see that. And something like that, just stick up here, because it's not a big mistake. I don't know how you do this every time. You make a mistake up here, you make another mistake, and I fix it.
would do it.
I don't know, I'm just that good, I know what I'm doing.
Layers on you.
I-
So for example, if I say, don't judge me, and it's,
I have like, we don't put my dad, and then put my mom, like 15 times my dad, put my mom.
Serious?
We had ducks at one point.
I had a pet dog once.
We don't.
Her name was Lois.
us that? Yes, we don't. It's like, we had kids and then my dog, you know, and then he was so bad, well, that's why it was like one of those, he's not too good, because then we had like the adult.
I didn't can't even read my handwriting. How would she check my notes if I
That's why I named her Lois. Just let her run the house.
That we put in those. We had a cage in the kitchen, so then it was outside the kitchen. So we had to take them inside. And we had a running, like,
My rat was like, cheers. Well.
running with door, but she died.
I was like,
Weird thing.
Stop looking at that. Why the heck do you have one? What is this? What is that?
yeah.
Oh, my bad.
It should be. Yeah, they do. The mascots, when they did the construction, they had the wires. Super weird. Isn't that great?
What the fuck is that?
You shouldn't have any problems, it should be totally unlocked.
They said, we go to the stairs right here.
He walks out and he walks out the door.
He's just gonna turn around and start running.
Oh, that'd be the mistake. You don't run. See, way these dogs are trained, that they will chase you until you stop running, and then they will just circle you, and circle you until you move. And I know this because I used to help train one of our canines all the time. I'd lay the track down. I'd set 5-mile tracks and they'd find me. I'd put the bite sleeve on and let them take the bite. I'd put the whole suit on and let them take the bite.
Does it hurt?
Oh my goodness, yeah. I mean, these things have got metal in them and leather and everything, and you can still feel the pressure.
Oh, that is a big bummer.
All right, now that you get to be the dummy too.
You're good, go ahead. This is Chase. Yeah, he's pretty big. You can see this full collar he's on, and this is the flat collar he has for work. The little thing on my waist is Chase's ball. That's the only reward Chase ever gets, is this ball. And when I pull it out, you'll see he'll give it all his attention because it's the same ball he's had since he was a kid. So it's what he works for. It's what he gets if he does good. He doesn't get it if he does bad. It helps keep him in line. Chase never gets any treats. He never gets a treat from like Pet Supply Plus. My wife doesn't give him treats. I don't give him treats. He eats the same food every day, and that's for court purposes. When Chase retires, we'll give him a big steak dinner and we'll treat him like a regular dog. But until then, it's important to note that police dogs, and Canine Beckman will tell you this, police dogs are different than regular dogs. They aren't meant to be pet. They aren't meant to be loved on. They're meant to save lives. That's officers' lives, people's lives, and things like that. It's important to remember that Canine Chase's job is to protect me and my other officers. It's not to be a pet, it's not to be loved on, it's not to be pet on. And while we do that, to let him know he's being good, at the end of the day, it's important to remember that he is a tool owned by the city of Burlington, and he's there to make sure people go home. So, any questions about Canine Chase? None? We're going to do what's called a little obedience training. It just lets Canine Chase know that I'm the boss and that ultimately I'm the one he needs to listen to. So I'll pull the ball out and he'll hear it. Ah. It's me stemming him, letting him know we're going to go to work. Foot. 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 Sit. Off. Here. Foot. Foot. And when he does good, he gets his ball. We talk to him in a high voice. We clap, give him a little tug. And that's it. He does a lot of cool different things. Here's another one. Come here. Los. You'll see everything's ball centered because that's what he wants. This is the only way him and I communicate so that he knows what my expectations of him are. Foots, foots. Sit. 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 Here. Foots. This is a big little guy. Off. Oh, boy. And that's pretty much it. Questions about him?
Now, him walking between your legs like that,
That is for any close quarter stuff. So a lot of the stuff we see him do, you know, when he pulls over to my left side, he's on my left side because my right side is my gun side, right? He's never on my right side for anything. His sit and his stay commands are important because if I send him into a room and we need to go around a corner, I need to be able to send him out, call him back, hit him with a here, put him in a sit, have us still clear this because just because he went through a room doesn't mean he didn't miss anything, right? Officers will check it and then we'll keep moving forward. So it's important for him to know when I say something, he needs to listen to it and he needs to come back. But the between the legs part, if we're going down a hallway and I've got my gun out here, he needs to be in between me so I can control him in case I need to send him on something or in case I need to hold him back from something. So, great question.
Yeah, if you send him after somebody and the person's legs still,
Mhm.
still like,
Yes. Yes.
and when will it go?
He lets go when I pull him off. So that's another really good reason and an important aspect of this, of him establishing that when I give a command, he needs to listen to it. Because if I'm sitting there and I'm unable to pull my dog off, he's still biting that person. And Chase is a big dog, so if he's biting someone, it's going to be doing significant damage as the time goes on. So I need to be able to grab him, pull him off, give him that one command, have him release, and then pull him off immediately. So, and you'll see that with Canine Rico too, and he'll stress the importance of building that relationship and letting the dogs understand that we need to be able to effectively communicate with one another. His commands, the things you hear me saying, are Dutch. Canine Chase's commands are in Dutch. So you need to be able to learn those and effectively let him know. You have to say things the same every time. So his sit is the same every time, the way I say it. His here is the same every time I say it. And the release command is the same every time I say it. So it's not a surprise when I grab his ball and I go, Los. And he lets it go. He sees me put it away. And he knows it's away. Sit. See? So even when I don't have the ball, he knows his down command, off, is the same every time.
How long did you have to go to training to learn how to handle that?
We were in Ohio for 2 weeks. I'm fortunate that K9 Beckman, your speaker on September 1st, he's a trainer for the company we go through. So I've actually been over to his house for like the last 4 months, just working with different dogs. Canine Chase is actually my second canine. Foots. Canine Paco was my first dog, and he unfortunately passed, but I spent 3 months with him up at Beckman's house, just training, building up on So
Do the two dogs get along?
off. They surprisingly do. They've never met when he's not in his kennel, but she'll go out to his kennel and he doesn't bark at her. So they probably won't meet while he's working. And I say that like they will never have unsupervised time together until he's retired. And that's just for him and her safety, just because he's a boy, she's a female. So it's up in the air, right? Because we want to make sure we get the most out of the dogs. Right now we have like a 6-year-ish rotation, just kind of depending on how he's doing and if he's healthy. He's a bigger dog, so I expect he ages a little bit more quickly. He's about 90 pounds. That's 90 pounds jumping into the car every night, jumping down out of the car every night. It's a lot of pressure on his shoulders and his hips. So it'll all just depend on how he ages. So, great question. Anything else? Yep.
How do you train the dogs to smooth out narcotics and stuff?
That's a good question. So the way I understand it, Officer Beckman will be able to explain a lot better. The way I understand it is dogs have what's called an olfactor part of their brain. We have the same one, but ours is significantly smaller. His is a large portion of his brain. So he can essentially file away different smells for years. So when he's a puppy, they're imprinted on different narcotics, and they're shown the odor and they're given a reward, being the ball. So they say, oh, when this smell happens, I get a reward. Or if I find it, I get a reward. As they get older, we start putting that ball in boxes with the odor. And if he finds the box, he puts his nose to it, he gives us the response we want, he gets his reward. So he starts associating that smell with, this is what I'm supposed to be looking for. This is how I get rewarded. And that's how we essentially train them with the smell. So you can train them on all narcotics, but when I was at my training, there was also a bomb. So he was trained on like incendiaries, flints, cell phone things, different things like that. So you can train these dogs to do everything. Their sense of smell is still being studied and discovered because of the things they can do. His tracking, you heard me say that he's tracking my son right now. So people smell different based on age, based on sex, based on hair color, based on the state they're in when a scent is laid. So me walking with him is gonna smell different than me sprinting away from somebody in fear. Someone sprinting away in fear. So it's important that I get different scent factors, the first of which was just my son because it was easier. And we lay tracks on them so he's able to smell somebody who is running away from home because they're super upset because they just got into a fight with their parents versus somebody who may be mentally challenged and just wandered off. So he can do all that stuff. Great question.
Can you search for objects?
Objects? He can, depending on the article that's left and what that person has touched. So for example, if you were like, oh, can you find my iPad? Not really. But if you ask me, hey, can you find my other sock? Here's the one. Then yeah, probably.
I'd have to have it come up with my piece on one side.
I hear you. So, but it.
Convinced that when I get on this side, it's gotta be on
There. Anything else? Well, I'm going to go put him up if you think of any other burning questions. I'll bring back some of his equipment. I have a couple of his different balls, one that he hasn't used, so it'll be dry. It's not covered in slobber. I'll bring back a thing we used to teach him to bite people, and just some of his different leashes and stuff. So we'll be right back.
Want me to help carry anything?
Nah, it'll be okay.
Yeah, you go back to Jason. What do you think of that dog? know that it's the same penalty if you kill enough canine if you kill a cop. Because they're seen as a member of law enforcement.
Isn't it bad if you put a,
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Yeah, once that canine's released, even the officers step back, because they don't go there. I've actually seen a couple officers get it accidentally by the canine. It's not pleasant, they have to hold them just with stitches. Yeah. Like I said, when I've taken the bites for the canines before, they will not be able to bite.
Not
They
me,
get
no.
hard.
No.
Now you might have a dog sitting on the arm.
That's my way for sure.
It'll drop you quick. Learn, there's a technique to it. That as you're running, you present the arm or what you want bit to the canine. And that's what they'll latch on to. I had one where I was hiding behind a trash can and I had the bite sleeve and on sandy ground. And that's all I had, it's just the bite sleeve. Alright? This dog come up, hit me. I slipped in the sand and fell backwards and he took the bite sleeve. At this point I knew to lay completely still and not move till the canine handler got to me, because if I make any move, he's tearing me apart. I was terrified.
Man, I was like, there's, it's either the dog kills me.
I was absolutely terrified. I also made the mistake of going to a canine handler's car to get our PBT, our breath test machine. I opened the door because he told me I could go get it. He didn't close his cage. And so when I opened the door and leaned in, now I had King right here growling in my face. I'm like, I can't move. I was stuck there until he came back. I'm trying to slowly reach over to hit the radio to call Officer Randall to come back and his dog. He finally came back. My face was getting tore up.
So here's one of Chase's balls. You can pass it around. His balls are a little different. They're manufactured by a company in the Netherlands, and they're the only ones who make it with a certain type of rubber. So you can see balls that look similar to that, but it'll never be like his ball. And that's just for him so that he can understand this is my ball. His balls don't get used by my other dog. They're his and his only. That one he's never used. It's just a backup in case he chews through the pink one. Here's one of his flat collars. You can see it says police, so nobody can say he isn't a police dog. There's a handle on it for me, so that I can hold him. I can hold him between my legs, on the side, things like that. Here's one of his pull collars. It's a real simple design. Super small. The links are small, so that I need to pull them off. I can get it underneath his neck. Pull him off. When he pulls away from me, it gets tighter. When he pulls closer, it gets looser. This big blue pad is what's called a bite sleeve. When we're doing patrol training or anything like that, a person can put this over their arm, all the way to the back. They essentially taunt Chase, feed it to him, and he bites onto this. This one's clean, he's never bitten anything. It's just one I use for show. You can see it's real thick. They bite really hard. So that's pretty cool. Part of being a canine handler is also being a good training partner for other canines. So myself and canine officer Beckman work hand in hand. I take bites from his dog Rico all the time. He takes bites from me all the time. I take bites from the other dogs. Laying tracks, I do it for him. He does it for me. Things like that. So. The first couple times you take bites from dogs, it's really scary because this big thing's running at you with its mouth open. After you do it a couple, 2, 3 times, you get used to it. You just kind of start Some dogs bite harder than others. The hardest bite I've ever taken has been from a dog named Raptor. He works in West Virginia. He's 45 pounds. He's super small, but he's bitten harder than any big dog I've seen.
I was telling where you're at, you feel the bite still through this.
Yes, you feel a lot of the pressure. Depending on the dog, you might get a little nick here and there, but it's a lot of the pressure and it's a lot of the thing. So, yeah. And when Canine Chase sees that, he dials in. He knows what's wrong.
Someone buy me.
On my new squad, I will. My car hasn't gotten here yet, but yes, when my new squad car gets here, I'll have a little button. It'll go on my vest. I'll wear it right here. That button, when I press it, shoots his door open. For example, if I'm fighting with somebody or they're on top of me, I can press that button. Canine Chase's door will release. He'll come to me and he'll bite who's ever on me. So.
That's cool.
Yep. Or if I'm running after somebody and the use of force is obviously approved, given all the circumstances, I can press that button, hit him with that here command, hit him with the foot's command, he'll come right next to me and we'll be ready. No, it doesn't. And we're going to put a big sign on the inside. When that one door swings open, it'll say canine deployed. So like for example, let's say I go to stop a car, they take off, yada, yada, yada. We find out who it is. They crash, they take off running. I'm the officer behind him, I press my button. Now Canine Chasing him and I are running, and a secondary officer shows up. They'll see my squad car. They'll see Canine Chase's doors open. They'll know, okay, I need to be careful. Canine Chase is out. They're probably chasing this person. So, the cars all come equipped with a special AC control thing. One of the big dangers with him being in a car all the time is obviously overheating, especially in the summertime. So there's special AC that runs into his back seats. I also will get if it goes to a certain temperature, I'll get a text. My alarm will go off and all the windows will go down. So, but even then, those systems fail. So I check on him every couple hours just to make sure he's okay. Any other questions? Anything else?
What would happen if the dog was out and somebody walked in and pushed him?
No bite. No bite. No bite. He's a pretty protective guy. So he came from a family in the Netherlands, my understanding. So for him, from his perspective, when I first met Canine Chase at my training, I picked him up at the airport in Chicago. He flew in from the Netherlands, and he had just been separated from his family on Monday. So the reason he's not with that family anymore is because his handler over there hurt his back, so he can't handle him anymore. So when I first met Canine Chase, he wanted nothing to do with me. And to be honest, I was like, okay, I'm not gonna take this dog. He's obviously super upset. But as time went on, and we got to know each other, it was just a perfect match, and now we play. So it's good. It's important to match a person with the right dog because of how much time you spend together and the importance of building that relationship. Canine handlers will tell you, you get the dog you were meant to get. So.
Do they have any German shepherds?
That's a great question. They don't. So you'll see more breeds than others. The two big ones you'll see are German shepherds and things that are called Belgian Malinois. They're smaller. Has everyone seen the county's dogs? Tank's a Belgian Malinois. It's a different type of shepherd. They're smaller. Their fur is a lot shorter, and they're a lot more agile. The same olfactor thing I was talking about in the brain, same size, so they can do a lot of the same things. But those are the two big ones. You'll also see Dutch shepherds, which are just bigger Belgian Malinois, a lot longer neck, usually in a brindle color. That's the same thing you're going to see is the large olfactor thing in their brain, and their drive to work. Drive is something that a dog inherently has to seek out what's called prey, small bunnies, squirrels, things like that, and that's how we're able to transition them into police work. But with that being said, you'll see bloodhounds because their olfactor factory is significantly larger than the other dogs. You'll see large schnauzers, a lot in Europe. you can see golden retrievers. I know several retrievers who are electronic based, so they sniff out like computers, cell phones, laptops, different things like that. So you can really see a variety in different breeds tailored to what that dog or task needs to be. So, great question. Something I tell people, all dogs bite. Just because a dog isn't trained to bite, it'll probably bite you. I did that before I was a canine handler. Be careful around dogs. One of my first calls I took was a dog bite at the ER where a family pet turned on a small child. So remember, all dogs bite. Be careful around dogs. Please leash your dogs.
What's the best way to approach it?
Don't. Is what I say. But if a dog approaches you, palms up, nothing fast, no quick movements, no flash photography, no loud voices, no yelling, no clapping. Really just let, if the dog comes up and sniffs you, that's fine. But yeah, dogs can be dangerous.
Thank you, Officer Porter.
No, thank you.
Appreciate
Thanks
you.
for having me.
All right, guys, if you have any late work, you want to make sure you get those turned in, okay? Some of you guys still are missing some of the daily assignments.